Helen Whitaker, 72 years old, a widow living quietly in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio. Ever since my husband passed away 12 years ago, my world has grown smaller. Just the old white clapboard house with its front porch swing and the routine doctor visits that reminded me I was still alive and still healthy. Before we dive into her true stories, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Hearing from people around the world makes these stories even more powerful and reminds us how connected we all are. That morning felt like any other. October air carried a sharp chill and red maple leaves scattered across the sidewalk as I walked into Dr. Samuel Carter's office. He'd been our family doctor for more than 3 decades, the man who treated my husband's asthma, who stitched up my son Mark after his football accident, who had become almost like family. If there was one person I trusted, it was Sam Carter. Inside the exam room, everything seemed normal at first. But as he wrapped the blood pressure cuff around my arm, I noticed his hands trembling. His eyes darted toward the hallway, avoiding mine. I frowned. "Sam, are you okay?" I asked. He cleared his throat, forcing a smile. "You're doing great, Helen. Strong Heart Labs look perfect. You've got many good years ahead." His words should have reassured me, but they didn't. His voice sounded strained, almost as if he were reading lines from a script he didn't believe. My pulse quickened. I slid off the exam table and reached for my coat. That's when it happened. As I bent down, Dr. Carter stepped forward too close and slipped something into the pocket of my jacket. The movement was so quick I might have missed it if I hadn't felt the paper brush against my hand. "Take good care of yourself," he said almost too cheerfully. Then came the part that made my skin prickle. "And remember, family isn't always what it looks like." My stomach dropped. What was he talking about? I wanted to press him, but his eyes begged me not to. The nurse knocked softly at the door, and just like that, the appointment was over. I walked down the long white hallway, my heart pounding. In my pocket, that folded slip of paper felt like it weighed 100 pounds. For a moment I thought I'll just read it when I get home in private, but another voice inside me screamed, "No! If he risked sneaking it to you, it matters now." Instead of heading to the parking lot, I ducked into the patient restroom. I locked the door, sat down hard on the plastic chair, and pulled out the note. It was written in Sam's hurried scrawl, the kind I'd seen on prescription pads for years. "Helen, don't go home. Danger. Find a lawyer immediately. SC." My breath caught. My chest tightened. I stared at those words until the letters blurred. "Don't go home." Danger images flashed through my mind. My son, Mark, lowering his voice when I walked into the kitchen. My daughter-in-law, Janet, stuffing papers into a drawer. My granddaughter, Chloe, rolling her eyes when I asked about her college applications. I had brushed it all off as stress, family tension, nothing more. But if Dr. Carter was warning me not to return home... The restroom mirror reflected back a woman with deep lines, tired eyes, and a hand trembling against her cheek. Yet beneath the fear, I saw something else resolve. Could it really be my own flesh and blood who posed the danger? Could the people I had sacrificed everything for, my time, my career, my friendships, be plotting against me? Tears stung my eyes, but I swallowed them down. Crying wouldn't help me now. "All right," I whispered to my reflection. "If this is a fight, I'm not walking into it unarmed." I folded the note carefully, tucked it into my wallet, and forced myself to walk back out into the corridor as if nothing had happened. A nurse smiled politely as I passed, and I returned the gesture. On the outside, I was the same old woman leaving a routine checkup. Inside, I knew everything had changed. I would not be driving straight home. I would not ignore Dr. Carter's warning. I didn't know what awaited me, but I knew one thing: my life had just taken a turn I never imagined at 72 years old. And for the first time in years, I felt the faint spark of a battle rising inside me. If you're still watching, comment 1 so I know you're still with me. The cab ride back to my neighborhood felt longer than usual. The slip of paper in my wallet pressed against me like a secret burning a hole through leather. I kept replaying Dr. Carter's words in my head. Don't go home. Danger. But where else was I supposed to go? At 72, I didn't exactly have a list of safe houses. By the time the taxi pulled up to my driveway, the sun had dipped low and the familiar white house stood in shadow. My chest tightened. I wanted to tell the driver to keep going to drop me off anywhere else, but pride forced me out of the car. I had lived here for over 40 years. I wasn't going to be scared away from my own home, not yet. The front door creaked as I stepped inside. In the living room, I found them, Mark, Janet, and Chloe, huddled together on the couch. They stopped talking the second they saw me. The silence was sharp, like a knife cutting through the air. Janet quickly shoved a stack of papers behind her back, too fast, too guilty. "Mom," Mark said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "How was the appointment?" I forced myself to sound casual. "Everything's fine. Dr. Carter says I'm in perfect health." Mark's jaw tightened. Janet shot him a glance. Chloe muttered something under her breath and crossed her arms. None of them looked relieved. In fact, I would have sworn they looked disappointed. "That's great," Grandma Chloe said, her tone flat, almost mocking. "Guess that means you'll be around for a long time." Something in my stomach nodded. I managed a polite smile, but inside I was reeling. Were they hoping for bad news? At dinner, the tension only grew thicker. Mark barely spoke, stabbing at his steak like it had personally offended him. Janet gave one-word answers, her smile glued on, but hollow. Chloe pushed peas around her plate, never once meeting my eyes. I tried to start conversations about the weather, about her classes, about anything, but every word felt like it bounced off a wall. Finally, I set down my fork. "Is something wrong?" Mark was quick, too quick. "No, Mom. Everything's fine. We're just tired." "Right," Janet added, though her voice had the edge of someone covering a lie. I studied them one by one. These were the people I had poured my life into. Mark, my only child, who I raised after his father died. Janet, the daughter-in-law I welcomed like she was my own. Chloe, the granddaughter who once curled up in my lap with picture books. And now they sat across from me like strangers plotting behind polite masks. After dinner, I excused myself and retreated to my room. My hands shook as I closed the door behind me. I pulled the note from my wallet again, rereading the scrawled warning. "Don't go home. Danger." The pieces were sliding into place. The hush in the living room when I walked in, the hidden papers, the cold looks, Dr. Carter's trembling hands. And suddenly the disappointment in Mark's eyes when I told him I was healthy made perfect, horrifying sense. I sat on the edge of my bed trying to calm my racing thoughts. The family I trusted, the family I had sacrificed everything for, was hiding something from me, something big. I thought about the mortgage papers I'd signed years ago, the insurance policies my husband had left me, the modest pension I lived on. To me, it was security. To them, maybe it looked like an inheritance waiting to be claimed. A shiver ran down my spine. I wanted to believe I was imagining things, that age was making me paranoid. But the doctor's note proved otherwise. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind against the window made me jump. From down the hall, I heard muffled voices. Mark's low rumble, Janet's sharp whisper, Chloe's laughter colder than I'd ever heard it. I pressed my ear against the door. "She won't last forever," Janet said. "Carter was supposed to help," Mark hissed. "She'll crack soon enough," Chloe chimed in. My stomach lurched. I stumbled back from the door, my heart pounding. There it was. Confirmation. They weren't just acting strange. They were planning something. Against me. I sat down on the edge of my bed, tears brimming in my eyes. Betrayal has a sound. That night, I heard it in the voices of my own blood. And for the first time in my life, I realized I might be safer trusting strangers than the people who carried my last name. The clock on my nightstand glowed 2:03 a.m. I had been lying awake for hours staring at the ceiling, the doctor's note folded under my pillow like a lifeline. My body was exhausted, but my mind refused to rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mark's disappointed face when I told him I was healthy. I heard Chloe's flat voice, "Guess that means you'll be around for a long time." I felt Janet's eyes on me like a hawk guarding prey. Then came the voices. Faint, but enough to pull me upright. I slipped on my slippers and padded softly to the door. The hallway was dark, but a thin line of light spilled from the kitchen downstairs. I crept closer, my heart hammering. Years of being a mother had taught me how to walk quietly. Those instincts came back now, like an old friend. The voices grew clearer. "The damn doctor wouldn't play along," Janet hissed, frustration dripping from her words. "He's always been stubborn," Mark muttered. "But we'll find another physician, someone willing to sign what we need." Chloe's voice cut in sharp, impatient. "We don't have time. I already sent in my college acceptance. I need that money now, not in 5 years when she finally dies of old age." I gripped the banister so hard my knuckles ached. My own granddaughter, my Chloe, talking about my death like it was an overdue bill. Olivia Mark stopped himself, then corrected Chloe. "Don't say it like that." His tone was more weary than angry. "But she's right. We can't wait. The house alone is worth nearly $500,000. Add her pension, her savings, we'd be set." Janet's voice turned icy. "Look, I didn't marry into this family to babysit a senile old woman. I expected a comfortable life, not 10 extra years of scraping by while she wastes money on her garden and church donations." I pressed a hand to my chest, fighting to breathe. Senile old woman. That's what I was to them. Not a mother, not a grandmother. Just an obstacle. Mark's voice lowered. "Tomorrow I'll talk to an attorney about guardianship. Maybe we don't need a doctor's approval right away. There has to be a way to declare her incompetent. And if that doesn't work," Janet snapped, "we'll just make her life hell until she gives in. Hide her TV remote, stop cooking for her, treat her like the burden she is. She'll beg to leave." A small laugh came from Chloe. "Honestly, I'm tired of pretending I love her. She's always in the way, asking where I'm going, why I'm out so late. It's insufferable." Tears stung my eyes, but I bit my lip until I tasted blood. These were the people I had raised, fed, clothed, sacrificed for. And now they were plotting to erase me from my own life. Then Mark said the words that made my blood run cold. "If we have to, we'll help her lose her mind for real. Switch her medications. Hide her things. Tell her she did stuff she never did. In a month, any doctor will sign off that she's unstable." Janet's voice brightened, almost gleeful. "Perfect. Once she's committed, we can sell the house, drain the accounts, and nobody will ever suspect a thing. To the outside world, we'll look like the devoted family taking care of poor, sick Helen." They laughed. All 3 of them laughed. The sound was crueler than anything I'd ever heard. My legs shook. I clutched the wall to keep from collapsing. But then something inside me shifted. The heartbreak was still there, but behind it, a spark lit. They thought I was weak, helpless, senile, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. I slipped back into my bedroom, careful not to make a sound. With trembling fingers, I opened the drawer of my nightstand and pulled out my phone. I had always used it for simple things, calls, photos of flowers in my garden, but tonight, it would be my weapon. I opened the voice recorder, pressed the red button, and whispered, "For the record." Then I tiptoed back to the hallway, leaning just close enough to catch their voices again. "I'll make copies of her cards first thing in the morning," Janet was saying. "And I'll dig through her files for the will," Mark replied. "If there isn't one, we'll just create one." Chloe's laugh was sharp. "Grandma's going to leave everything to us anyway. We'll just speed it up." My phone captured every word, every betrayal. I eased back into my room, stopped the recording, and sat down on the edge of the bed. My body trembled, but my mind felt clear for the first time in years. The note had been right. Don't go home. Danger. But now, I wasn't just a victim. I had proof. Proof that could save me and bury them. I tucked the phone under my pillow, my grip tight. I knew I wouldn't sleep. But I also knew something else. The people in this house weren't my family anymore, and tonight was the last night I would ever let them think they had control. The house was silent again, but my heart wasn't. It pounded in my chest long after their voices faded into sleep. I sat alone in my bedroom phone, clutched in my hands, staring into the darkness. The recording was proof, yes, but proof didn't erase the ache in my chest. It's a strange thing betrayal doesn't come crashing down all at once. It seeps in like water through a cracked roof. One drop, then another, until you realize your whole foundation is soaked through. I pulled the blanket around my shoulders and let my mind wander back to the years when everything I did was for them. When Mark was 5, he got pneumonia so bad the doctor wasn't sure he'd pull through. I remember sitting by his hospital bed, holding his tiny hand, whispering lullabies, just to keep him calm while machines beeped around us. I didn't leave that chair for 3 days. My husband would sneak in sandwiches and coffee, but I couldn't eat. Not until Mark's fever finally broke. When he was 12, he wanted to join Little League. We didn't have the money for uniforms and equipment, not on my husband's factory wages and my part-time job at the library. So I picked up evening cleaning shifts at the local school. I'd mop hallways until midnight, then pack his baseball gear at dawn. I still remember the look on his face the first time he ran onto that field, pure joy. That smile was worth every aching bone in my body. When my husband died suddenly of a heart attack, it felt like my world ended, but I didn't crumble because I had Mark. He was 20, then moody, angry at the world, lashing out in every direction. I took the blows, the slammed doors, the cruel words. I worked double shifts to keep the lights on, cooked his favorite meals even when he wouldn't touch them, prayed every night he'd find his way. And when he met Janet, I opened my arms. She wasn't easy to love, sharp-tongued, restless, but I thought if I welcomed her, maybe she'd soften. I gave them the master bedroom when they moved in, told myself it was fine to take the smaller guest room. I wanted them to feel at home, to build a future together. Then Chloe was born, and my heart opened all over again. I became the babysitter, the chauffeur, the homework helper. I sang her to sleep when Janet was too tired, cheered at her school plays, spent hours sewing costumes. I remember the Christmas she asked Santa for a red velvet dress. I stayed up 3 nights straight sewing one with my old machine because I couldn't afford to buy it. She wore it once, pouted that it wasn't what she wanted, and stuffed it in the back of her closet. Still, I kept every drawing she ever made me tucked into a box under my bed. 40 years of sacrifice. 40 years of believing that love given would one day be love returned. And now, here I was listening to them plot how to erase me, how to twist my mind until I didn't know my own name. I wiped a tear from my cheek. People say aging makes you invisible, that the world stops seeing you once your hair turns gray. But it's different when invisibility comes not from strangers, but from your own family. They had stopped seeing me as a mother, a grandmother, a human being. To them, I was a burden, a wallet with a weak pulse. But in that moment, I realized something I had never allowed myself to admit. I wasn't just hurt. I was angry, deep, bone-deep angry. Not the kind that makes you slam a door, but the kind that simmers until it becomes fuel. I stood and walked to my dresser. On top sat a photograph of my husband taken the summer before he died. He was smiling, holding a fishing rod, the lake shining behind him. I touched the frame. "You'd be furious if you knew," I whispered. "But don't worry, I'm not going to let them win." The woman staring back at me in the mirror was not the weak, senile grandmother they imagined. She was the same woman who had survived widowhood, poverty, and sleepless nights by hospital beds. She had built a life from scraps before, and she could do it again. I wasn't naive anymore. Sacrifice, I realized, is noble only if it's valued. Given to the wrong people, it becomes a noose around your neck. That night, I made myself a promise. I would stop sacrificing. I would start surviving, and more than that, I would start fighting back. The dawn light crept through my curtains, painting the walls in pale gray. I hadn't slept at all. My body was weary, but my mind had never been sharper. The doctor's warning, the recorded whispers from the kitchen, the memories of everything I had sacrificed, they all pressed together inside me until the truth was undeniable. If I stayed, I wouldn't last. Dr. Carter had told me plainly, "Don't go home." I had ignored him, walked straight back into the lion's den. Now I understood why. This house, the same one where I'd cooked birthday cakes, wrapped Christmas presents, and rocked Chloe to sleep, had turned into a trap. And the people I once trusted most were the ones waiting to spring it. I sat at my dresser looking at the photograph of my late husband again. His steady smile reminded me of his favorite saying, "Helen, don't wait for someone to save you. Be your own rescue." That's exactly what I needed to do. I opened the top drawer and pulled out the small fireproof box I kept tucked away. Inside were my essential documents, my birth certificate, social security card, passport, insurance papers, and a bank ledger. My hands trembled as I packed them into a leather satchel along with my wallet, a few changes of clothes, and the phone that now carried my family's damning secrets. For a moment, I hesitated. What if they noticed? What if Mark barged in and caught me packing? But then I thought of Janet's voice. Hide her things, switch her medications. The fear hardened into resolve. I wasn't running away like a sea. At 5:30 a.m., the house was silent. I slipped on my walking shoes, the same pair I used for Sunday strolls through the park, and tiptoed into the hallway. My footsteps were soft, but every creak of the floorboards made my heart leap. I paused outside Mark and Janet's room. Muffled snores filtered through the door. Good. They were still asleep. I started down the stairs, my breath shallow, when suddenly a floorboard groaned. I froze, clutching the banister. For a moment, I imagined the door flying open, Mark demanding to know where I was going. But the house remained still. I exhaled slowly and continued. At the front door, I hesitated again. My whole life was inside this house, photographs, my husband's fishing rod, Chloe's childhood drawings, but it wasn't my home anymore. Home is where you are safe, and here I was prey. I turned the knob and slipped into the cool morning air. The street was quiet, lined with maple trees just beginning to turn gold. I pulled my cardigan tighter and walked briskly to the corner where I called a cab. When the driver arrived, I climbed into the back seat and gave him the address of the downtown branch of my bank. "Early start, huh?" he said cheerfully. I forced a smile. "Yes, I've got things to take care of." He didn't need to know that I was escaping the people who shared my last name. At the bank, I withdrew $5,000 in cash. The teller gave me a cautious look. "That's a lot to carry, ma'am." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," I said firmly. "I have personal matters to handle." I tucked the bills deep into my satchel along with my documents and walked back outside. Next stop, a hotel. I chose the Harrison Plaza, an older but reputable place downtown. The receptionist, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, greeted me warmly. "How long will you be staying with us, ma'am?" "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Maybe a week. Maybe longer. It depends how things go with family matters." She nodded as if she understood more than I was saying and handed me a keycard. My room was on the 9th floor with a view of the city skyline. I closed the door behind me, locked it, and for the first time in months I felt something I hadn't dared to hope for: safety. I set my satchel on the bed, took out my phone, and played the recording from last night. My son's voice filled the room. "We'll switch her medications. We'll hide her things." Janet's cold laugh followed. Chloe's flat tone, "I'm tired of pretending to love her." The words cut deep, but they also steeled me. This wasn't paranoia. This was reality. And now I had evidence. I sat down at the desk, pulled out a notepad, and began to make a list. Find a lawyer. Secure my finances. Document every single betrayal. For decades, I had been the woman who cooked, cleaned, and cared for everyone else, the invisible grandmother who sacrificed quietly. But not anymore. As I wrote, my hand steadied. I felt the first flicker of strength, like a fire catching spark. My family thought I was weak, senile, powerless. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of my fight. The Harrison Plaza's 9th floor suite became my war room. For years, I had been the silent caretaker, the peacemaker, the one who made sacrifices nobody noticed. But now, sitting at the desk with my notepad filled with names and tasks, I felt something new: strategy. I wasn't just running. I was preparing to fight back. The first step was obvious. I needed a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but someone sharp enough to slice through the lies Mark and Janet were weaving around me. I asked the hotel concierge for a recommendation, framing it as estate planning. She gave me the name of Graham Fletcher, a senior partner at Fletcher & Moore, a firm downtown known for handling high-profile cases. I called his office that morning, my voice steadier than I expected. "This is Helen Whitaker," I said. "I need an urgent consultation. Today, if possible." By some miracle, or maybe because I sounded like a woman who meant business, they agreed to see me within the hour. Fletcher's office was everything you'd expect: polished wood leather chairs, diplomas lining the walls. Graham himself was in his late 50s, tall, composed, with the kind of presence that filled the room without raising his voice. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Whitaker?" he asked, folding his hands on the desk. I took out my phone, pressed play, and let the recording speak for itself. "Switch her medications. Hide her things. She'll look unstable in no time." By the time the recording ended, Fletcher's calm expression had hardened. "Whitaker," he said slowly, "what your family is planning constitutes elder abuse fraud and conspiracy. If we handle this correctly, they could face serious prison time." I swallowed. "I don't just want them stopped. I want them exposed, publicly. I want the world to know what they tried to do to me." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Then you've come to the right place. But we'll need more than one recording. We'll need documentation patterns of behavior, evidence of financial misconduct." I leaned forward. "That's where I'll need help. Someone to dig." That afternoon, Fletcher introduced me to Rachel Vega, a private investigator who had once worked for the state fraud unit. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed with a handshake that told me she didn't waste time. "Elder exploitation cases are a nightmare," she said, flipping open a small notebook. "But they're also personal to me. My grandmother went through something similar. I'll take your case." I gave her everything I had, the recording, the note from Dr. Carter, and what little I knew about my family's finances. Rachel listened intently, jotting notes, her eyes narrowing at every detail. "They're already testing the waters," she said. "I'd bet money Janet's been opening credit cards in your name. And if your son's talking about guardianship, he's already been sniffing around lawyers who'll play along." She looked at me with something like respect. "The fact that you recorded them gives us a head start. Most people your age don't think of that." I couldn't help a small smile. "They think I'm helpless. That's their mistake." That night, back in my hotel room, I opened my notebook again. The list was growing. Secure bank accounts, change credit cards, freeze credit reports, file preliminary complaints through Fletcher, let Rachel dig into Janet and Mark's financial activities. Each item I checked off felt like reclaiming a piece of my life, but it wasn't enough. I wanted more than survival. I wanted them to feel what I had felt, the dread, the betrayal, the humiliation. So I added a new line to my list: plan their downfall, publicly. Rachel called the next day with her first findings. "Janet's got 3 credit cards in your name, about $20,000 in charges. Fancy dinners, clothes, even a weekend getaway in Florida." I clenched my jaw. I remembered that weekend. Janet had cried, saying her mother was sick, and I'd pressed cash into her hands to help, all the while she was on the beach sipping cocktails with my money. "There's more," Rachel continued. "Mark lost his job 6 months ago. He's been covering it up. They've been living off you entirely." The anger that rose in me wasn't the sharp kind. It was steady, cold, controlled. They thought they were bleeding me dry in secret. Now I had proof. That evening I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the hotel window, watching the city lights flicker. For the first time in years, I wasn't just the grandmother in the background. I was the one writing the story. And in this story, my family wasn't going to get away with betrayal. They were going to pay for it. Not just in court, not just with money, but in every way that mattered. The plan for retaliation had begun. 2 days into my stay at the Harrison Plaza, I was beginning to feel like a fugitive hiding in plain sight. I ate breakfast in the hotel cafe, kept my curtains drawn, and turned my phone on only long enough to check for calls from Graham Fletcher or Rachel Vega. Every time my cell buzzed, my heart jumped, half afraid it would be Mark demanding to know where I was. But it wasn't Mark that morning. It was Rachel. Her voice carried the excitement of someone who had just hit gold. "Helen, you might want to sit down for this." I was already sitting at the desk, pen in hand, notebook open. "Go ahead," I said. "Your daughter-in-law Janet has been running a little side project. She's applied for not 3 but 5 credit cards in your name. Total charges over $40,000. I closed my eyes, steadying myself. Where did the money go? Luxury stores, jewelry, a vacation in the Keys, and get this, regular transfers to a man named David Sloan. The name hit me like a slap. David Sloan was my neighbor's husband, a man I'd waved to across the fence for years. Rachel continued, "I've got photographs. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons she meets him at a motel outside town. They've been having an affair for at least 2 years. For a moment I couldn't speak. Janet, who had always looked at me with that smug smile, who had whispered about me behind my back, she was the one sneaking around like a teenager. Rachel didn't stop there. As for Mark, he's been lying about more than his job. He's racked up gambling debts. $115,000 to some very unfriendly people. That's the real reason he's desperate to get his hands on your assets. I gripped the pen so hard it nearly snapped. My son, my only son, betting away his life while pretending to care for mine. And your granddaughter, Chloe. Rachel said, lowering her voice. She's pregnant. The father is 50 years old, married and already cutting ties. She's been telling her friends the baby will be her ticket to financial freedom. I felt the air leave my lungs. Pregnant. My Chloe. I wanted to feel sympathy, but all I could hear was her voice echoing in the kitchen. I'm tired of pretending to love her. I took a long breath. Rachel, keep digging. Every lie, every secret, I want it documented. You'll have a full report by the end of the week, she promised. When I hung up, I sat motionless for a long time, the city noise drifting faintly through the window. I wasn't shocked, not anymore. I was hardened. Every betrayal she uncovered was like a brick being pulled out of the foundation of the house I had built with my life. It should have collapsed me. Instead, it was clearing space for something new. That evening, Graham called. Helen, I've reviewed Rachel's findings. With what we already have, you're recording the credit card fraud, the gambling debts. This isn't just elder abuse. It's a criminal conspiracy. If we file now, the case will be airtight. My voice was steady when I answered. We're not filing yet. Not until they've dug themselves in so deep there's no way out. I want them to think they're winning. Graham chuckled softly. You're a fighter, Mrs. Whitaker. I like that. Just be careful. This kind of deception cuts both ways. After we hung up, I stared at the skyline outside my window. Neon signs flickered. Cars moved like streams of light. Somewhere across town, my so-called family sat in my house plotting how to strip me of everything I had. They thought I was powerless. They thought they knew every card in my hand, but they didn't know about Rachel. They didn't know about Graham, and most of all, they didn't know about the steel in my spine that had been forged through years of sacrifice. The dirt was piling up against them. Soon, it wouldn't just be my secret anymore. It would be theirs exposed to the world. And when that day came, they'd learn that betrayal doesn't just cut one way. By the end of the week, Rachel had delivered everything I needed, a binder thick with photographs, financial records, text messages, and transcripts. Each page was a nail in the coffin of the people who once called themselves my family. But evidence alone wasn't enough. I wanted the truth to come crashing down on them in a way they couldn't wriggle out of. That's when the idea struck me. If they were so eager to sell my house, why not let them try publicly? I made an appointment with a well-known real estate firm downtown posing as a buyer. Rachel arranged the rest. All I had to do was show up, play my part, and watch the trap spring shut. The morning of the meeting, I dressed carefully. A sleek black dress, a pearl necklace my husband had once saved 3 months' wages to buy, and the new leather handbag I had purchased the week before. Looking in the mirror, I saw not a victim, not a frail grandmother, but a woman in command of her own story. At 10 sharp, I walked into the glass-fronted office of Richardson Realty. The receptionist, young and eager, greeted me with a smile. Mrs. Whitaker. Mr. Peterson will be right with you. He'll be showing you a few of our premium listings. Perfect, exactly as planned. We had just begun touring a beautiful property across the street, a modern home with floor-to-ceiling windows, when the voices I knew better than my own echoed through the lobby. Good morning, Mark said smoothly. We're here to discuss selling my mother's property. She isn't well enough to handle her affairs, so we're taking care of things for her. I froze on the staircase, my real estate agent beside me. He gave me a puzzled look. Do you know those people? Oh, yes, I said, my voice calm but ringing with something sharper. That's my family. We descended the stairs together. Mark turned at the sound of my heels clicking against the marble. His face drained of color. Janet's mouth opened in a silent gasp. Chloe shifted uneasily, her confidence faltering. Mom, Mark stammered. What are you doing here? The same thing you are, I replied evenly. Looking at property. Though unlike you, I don't need to lie to get it. The other agent, clearly uncomfortable, cleared his throat. Sir, do you have documentation proving you have power of attorney over Mrs. Whitaker's estate? Mark fumbled. We're in the process. The papers are being finalized. They don't exist. I cut in, raising my voice so everyone in the office could hear. There is no power of attorney. There is no legal guardianship. There is only fraud manipulation and a family who would rather see me locked away than living my own life. Gasps rippled through the lobby. People paused at their desks. Clients turned their heads. I reached into my handbag and pulled out my phone. "Let me demonstrate," I said, and pressed play. Mark's voice filled the office clear as day. "We'll switch her medications, hide her things, tell her she did stuff she never did. In a month, any doctor will certify she's unstable." Janet lunged forward. "That recording is illegal." "Not in this state," I answered, sliding the phone back into my purse. "And certainly not when it's preventing a crime." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the hum of the air conditioner. Faces around the room hardened with disgust. I could feel the tide shifting. The perfect family mask my son and his wife wore had just shattered in front of strangers. Right on cue, 2 attorneys from Fletcher's office walked in, accompanied by a notary. Mrs. Whitaker once said formally, "We're here to document any false claims being made regarding your estate." I gestured toward my family. "There they are. Ask them to produce a single legal document giving them the right to sell my home." Mark opened his mouth, then closed it again. Janet clutched her handbag as if it could shield her. Chloe looked down at the floor, cheeks burning. The attorney turned to the notary. "Please note for the record, no documents were provided. Any attempt to sell or manage Mrs. Whitaker's property without authorization constitutes fraud." The real estate lobby buzzed with whispers. My family, once so confident, stood frozen, exposed for what they were. I almost pitied them, but only almost. I adjusted my pearl necklace and smiled faintly. You see, family isn't about blood. It's about loyalty, and these people have none. Then I turned to the stunned onlookers. "Thank you all for witnessing the truth." As I walked out the glass doors into the sunlight, I felt lighter than I had in years. The confrontation hadn't ended the war, but it had dealt the first public blow. My so-called family wanted to humiliate me in private. Instead, I had humiliated them in front of the world. And this was only the beginning. By the time I returned to my hotel suite, my phone was already buzzing nonstop. 30 missed calls from Mark, 20 from Janet, and a flood of text messages that shifted tone with every hour, pleading furious, threatening, desperate. At first, I ignored them, let them stew. But curiosity won, and I began to read. "Mom, we need to talk. This isn't what you think. Helen, how could you humiliate us like that in public? Grandma, please, you're ruining our lives. We can fix this together." Then came the threats. "If you don't stop this, we'll take legal action. You're unstable and everyone knows it. You won't win. We'll make sure of it." I set the phone down, a smile tugging at my lips. Panic was setting in, and panic made people sloppy. Across town, in the house that was once mine, the perfect family portrait was cracking. Mark paced the living room, his hair disheveled tie hanging loose around his neck. She blindsided us, Janet. Right there in front of agents, lawyers, strangers. Do you have any idea how bad that looked? Janet sat stiffly on the sofa, arms crossed, her usual composure unraveling. "Don't blame me. You promised me she'd be easy to control. You said she was soft, sentimental, too trusting. And yet there she was, parading recordings like some detective." Chloe hovered near the kitchen doorway, her phone clutched in her hand. "It's all over social media," she muttered. "Someone in that office posted about it already. My friends are texting me nonstop. They're saying my grandma is a hero and my parents are criminals." Her voice cracked. "Do you realize how humiliating this is for me?" "Humiliating," Janet snapped, turning on her daughter. "You should be worried about survival. If your grandmother presses charges, we're finished. All of us." Mark stopped pacing, his face pale. "The credit cards, the gambling debts. If she's got proof of all that—" He trailed off, sinking into a chair. "We could actually go to jail." Chloe's eyes widened. "Jail? Dad, I didn't sign up for this. I just wanted help with college. I didn't think—" "You didn't think," Janet cut in coldly. "None of us thought she'd fight back. She's 70 years old. We assumed—" "Well, she's not acting 70, Mark muttered bitterly. "She's acting like she's 30 and out for blood." The panic fractured their unity. Mark tried to regain control. "We need a new plan. Damage control. Maybe if we apologize, play the loving family angle." "She'll never forgive us now," Janet interrupted. "Did you see her face in that office? She's out for revenge." "Then maybe we flip it," Mark said slowly. "Maybe we go on the offensive, claim she's the one losing her mind, that the recordings were manipulated." Chloe looked horrified. "You want to make her look crazy after she already exposed us? That'll just prove everything she said is true." Janet buried her face in her hands. "We should have pushed harder with that other doctor. We should have acted sooner." Mark slammed his fist on the table, rattling the picture frames. "Enough. She thinks she's clever, but she's still one woman. She doesn't have anyone but some lawyer and a private eye. We're family. We stick together. We fight back, and we bury her before she buries us." But his voice lacked conviction. Even as he spoke, he could feel control slipping through his fingers. Back in my hotel room, I listened to another voicemail, Janet's voice shaky and desperate. "Helen, please, think about Chloe. Do you really want to drag your own granddaughter through this? She's young. She made mistakes. But don't punish her for ours. If you love her at all, stop this now." I replayed the message twice, listening carefully. It wasn't love in her voice. It was fear. Fear of exposure. Fear of losing everything. And Chloe, my poor Chloe. She was unraveling faster than either of them. Maybe, just maybe, she could still be pulled out from under their influence, or maybe she was just as guilty. Either way, their panic was my weapon. The more they scrambled, the deeper they sank. The war was no longer about survival. It was about strategy. And for the first time in decades, I was holding all the cards. The morning after my family's public humiliation, I sat in the hotel lounge with a fresh cup of coffee and a newspaper spread across the table. My story was already making waves. Local headlines didn't mention me by name, but the phrases were unmistakable. "Elderly woman outsmarts family's fraud attempt, and doctor's warning helps senior expose abuse plot." Reading those words filled me with a mix of pride and sadness. Pride because I wasn't invisible anymore. Sadness because it had taken betrayal for the world to finally see me. As I folded the paper, my phone buzzed with a call from Graham Fletcher. "Helen," he said, his voice steady. "I've been contacted by 3 different organizations since yesterday. Senior advocacy groups. They saw the reports and want to support you. You're becoming more than a case, you're a symbol." I wasn't sure how to feel about being a symbol. But if my battle could shine a light for others, then maybe my suffering wasn't wasted. That afternoon, Graham arranged a meeting at his office. When I walked into the conference room, I was greeted by a handful of strangers, men and women with kind eyes, some older, some younger. They introduced themselves: a retired teacher whose son drained her retirement account, a widower whose daughter tried to sell his farm behind his back, a woman in her 40s who worked with a nonprofit called Voices for Elders. One by one, they shared their stories, different details, same wounds, betrayal from the people they trusted most. As I listened, my anger softened into something sharper purpose. The woman from the nonprofit, Claire, leaned forward. "Mrs. Whitaker, your courage is giving people hope. If you're willing, we'd like to use your story to raise awareness about elder abuse. Public talks, maybe even a televised interview." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to retreat into privacy. But another part, the part that had been silenced for decades, wanted to speak. "If it helps protect others," I said finally, "I'll do it." Claire's smile was warm, grateful. "You'll be saving lives." After the meeting, Graham pulled me aside. "I know this is overwhelming, Helen, but remember, every eye on your story adds pressure to your family. They won't just be facing you in court. They'll be facing the court of public opinion." I nodded. "That's exactly what I want." Rachel arrived later that evening with more findings. She spread photographs and documents across my hotel desk like a detective unveiling the final act. "Janet tried to pawn your jewelry again, but the shopkeeper called the police. Mark visited another doctor, his 3rd in 2 weeks, trying to get you declared incompetent. Chloe's been telling classmates you're in advanced dementia so she can borrow money for medical expenses." I shook my head slowly. "They're digging their own graves," Rachel smirked. "And we're just collecting the shovels." That night, I received an email from a woman named Evelyn in Arizona. She had seen a clip of my confrontation online. "Mrs. Whitaker, my daughter has been trying to take control of my pension for months. I was afraid to speak up, but watching you gave me courage. I'm contacting a lawyer tomorrow. Tears stung my eyes. For years I had believed my sacrifices were wasted. Now my pain was planting seeds of resistance in others. The following Sunday, I met with Claire and her group at a community center. Seniors and their families filled the room, the air buzzing with quiet anticipation. When Claire introduced me, applause rippled through the crowd. I stood at the podium, hands trembling slightly, and began to speak. My name is Helen Whitaker. I'm 70 years old, and last week I discovered that my son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter were conspiring to have me declared incompetent so they could steal everything I had. Gasps filled the room, but I pressed on telling them about the doctor's note, the recordings, the lies, and the escape. When I finished, the silence was heavy. Then the applause came louder this time, rising like a tide. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel like a burden. I felt like a leader. That evening back at the hotel, Graham called again. The prosecutor wants to move forward. With Rachel's evidence, plus your testimony and the support of advocacy groups, your family doesn't stand a chance. Trial prep begins next week. I looked out the window at the city lights, my reflection faint in the glass. The woman staring back at me wasn't the grandmother my family dismissed as weak and senile. She was someone stronger. The allies were gathering. The evidence was ready. And soon the courtroom would become the stage where the truth burned away every lie. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and old paper, the kind of scent that carried both history and judgment. As I walked up the marble steps dressed in a navy blue suit that fit me like armor, I felt the weight of every eye on me. Reporters clustered near the entrance, snapping photographs calling my name. I kept my chin high. I was not a victim arriving at court. I was a woman demanding justice. Beside me, Graham Fletcher carried his leather briefcase with calm confidence. Rachel Vega followed close, a thick binder of evidence tucked under her arm. And just behind us, Chloe, my granddaughter, walked quietly, her hands folded across her stomach. She had chosen to testify for the prosecution, and though I wasn't sure yet if I could forgive her, I was grateful she had found the courage to tell the truth. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with hushed conversations. The gallery was packed, journalists, curious locals, and a row of seniors from Voices for Elders, their faces resolute. They weren't just here for me. They were here for themselves, for every parent and grandparent betrayed by their own blood. Then the bailiff called the room to order. My heart lurched when I saw them, Mark, Janet, and Chloe, seated at the defense table. Mark looked gaunt, his hair thinner, his suit wrinkled. Janet's usual smugness had evaporated, her lips pressed into a tight line. And Chloe stared at the table as if she couldn't bear to meet anyone's eyes. "All rise," the bailiff said. The judge entered, a woman with steel-gray hair and a gaze sharp enough to cut through lies. "You may be seated." The trial began. The prosecutor opened with power. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about betrayal. Not by strangers, not by con artists in the shadows, but by the very people who were supposed to protect and love the victim. We will prove beyond doubt that the defendants conspired to steal, defraud, and psychologically manipulate Mrs. Helen Whitaker, a 70-year-old widow, for their own financial gain." When the defense lawyer rose, his tone was oily, rehearsed. "This is not a case of fraud. This is a family matter twisted into something ugly. Mrs. Whitaker is an elderly woman suffering from paranoia, and her family only wanted to ensure she was properly cared for. You will see that this is nothing more than a misunderstanding fueled by senility." My blood boiled, but I kept my face composed. Soon enough, his lies would unravel. The first days were devoted to evidence. Rachel's photographs projected onto the courtroom screen, Janet at the pawn shop. With my jewelry, Mark signing forms for fraudulent credit cards, Chloe bragging and texts about borrowing money in my name. Bank statements, transcripts, surveillance, each piece a stone stacked into a wall that hemmed them in tighter. The jury shifted uncomfortably as the prosecutor played my recording. Mark's voice filled the courtroom. "We'll switch her medications, hide her things. In a month, any doctor will certify she's unstable." Janet buried her face in her hands. Mark's jaw clenched. Chloe closed her eyes. The jury's faces hardened with disgust. Then came Chloe's turn on the stand. Her voice shook at first, but with each question she grew steadier. "Yes, I heard them planning to put Grandma in a nursing home against her will. Yes, I heard them discuss switching her medications to make her seem confused. Yes, I participated at first. I thought I would benefit. But when I realized they were willing to destroy me too, I decided to tell the truth. The defense tried to paint her as a liar, motivated by guilt and desperation. But when she admitted her pregnancy openly without shame and spoke of wanting to build a better life for her child, even the sternest jurors softened. Finally, it was my turn. My heart pounded as I walked to the witness stand, swearing to tell the truth. The prosecutor's questions guided me through the story. The doctor's note, the late-night whispers, the escape to the hotel. I spoke slowly, clearly, refusing to let my voice tremble. They didn't just betray me, I told the jury. They tried to erase me. They wanted to make me doubt my own mind, to destroy the last years of my life so they could take what I had built with my husband. That isn't love. That isn't family. That is cruelty. The defense attorney rose for cross-examination. Mrs. Whitaker, isn't it true that you withheld millions of dollars in secret accounts from your family? Yes, I said calmly, because love isn't measured in money. I wanted them to build lives of their own, not live off mine. His voice grew sharper. But don't you think that secrecy suggests instability? I leaned forward. No, it suggests wisdom. Because if I had told them, they would have stolen it long ago. Laughter rippled quietly through the gallery. The judge banged her gavel for order, but I saw the jurors' eyes. They weren't laughing at me. They were laughing at the absurdity of the defense's case. After 5 long days, closing arguments rang like the final toll of a bell. The prosecutor, this isn't just a case of theft. It's elder abuse, a deliberate campaign to strip a woman of her dignity, her independence, and her life. If this can happen to Helen Whitaker, it can happen to any parent, any grandparent. You are their voice. Deliver justice. The defense. This family is broken. Yes, but broken families are not criminals. Do not punish them for misunderstandings and private conflicts. The jury deliberated for only 2 hours. When they filed back in, the foreman stood. We find the defendants guilty on all counts: fraud, conspiracy, forgery, and elder abuse. The gavel struck. The courtroom erupted. Some cheered, others wept. Mark slumped forward, his head in his hands. Janet sobbed openly, begging the judge for mercy. Chloe buried her face against the defense table, her shoulders shaking. The judge's voice rang out clear. Mark Whitaker, you are sentenced to 12 years in state prison. Janet Whitaker, 10 years. Chloe Whitaker, for your cooperation and testimony, you will serve probation with mandatory counseling. I closed my eyes. Justice. At last. As the bailiffs led my son and daughter-in-law away in handcuffs, Mark glanced back at me. For a moment, I saw the little boy I had once carried on my hip, but the man he became was no longer mine. I turned away. When I walked out of the courthouse, the reporters swarmed again, shouting questions. One of them asked Mrs. Whitaker, "Do you feel justice was served?" I paused on the courthouse steps, the autumn sun warm on my face. Legal justice has been served, I said. But the real justice is that I am free, free from lies, free from manipulation, and free to live the rest of my life on my own terms. The cameras flashed, the crowd applauded, and for the first time in 45 years I felt truly unbound. The trial was over, the sentences delivered, and the heavy doors of the courthouse closed behind me, with a final echo that sounded almost like freedom. For weeks afterward, I would wake in the early hours of the morning, heart racing, expecting to hear voices whispering in my kitchen, expecting to feel the old dread pressing against my chest. But each time I opened my eyes to quiet. No plotting, no lies, just silence and the soft glow of a new life unfolding. In those quiet mornings, I often turned to my Bible, the same one my husband had given me decades ago. One verse in particular burned into my heart, "For the love of money is the root of all evil." 1 Timothy 6:10. Looking back, it was clear. My family's betrayal wasn't born from hatred or misunderstanding. It was born from greed. They didn't want me gone because they didn't love me. They wanted me gone because they loved money more than me. That truth was sharper than any blade, but it was also liberating, because once I named it, I stopped blaming myself. 6 months after the verdict, I moved into a smaller house outside the city. It wasn't grand like the one Mark and Janet had tried to steal from me, but it was mine, full of sunlight and peace. Chloe, having chosen a different path, moved in with me during her pregnancy. Our afternoons together became the medicine my soul didn't know it needed. She studied, I gardened, and together we built a rhythm that felt more like family than anything I had experienced in years. She often asked me, "Grandma, do you regret adopting Dad?" And I always answered truthfully, "No." I regret not realizing sooner that kindness should never come at the cost of your own dignity. Those words became my compass. With Graham Fletcher's guidance, I founded a small charity focused on protecting seniors from exploitation. Rachel Vega, the private investigator who had uncovered so many of my family's lies, volunteered her time to help other cases. Claire from Voices for Elders introduced me at community meetings where I shared my testimony. At first, speaking was hard. Reopening wounds always is. But I remembered another verse: defend the weak and the fatherless. Uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. Psalm 82:3. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a call to action. And so I told it again and again. People listened. Some cried. Some nodded with recognition because they too had suffered in silence. Each time I spoke, I reminded them, blood may make us related, but loyalty makes us family. That simple truth resonated more deeply than anything else. Now, when I look back, I realize this wasn't just a story about betrayal. It was about rebirth. My family tried to destroy my spirit, but in doing so, they forced me to rediscover my strength. They tried to silence me, but instead they gave me a voice that reached further than I ever imagined. They wanted me powerless, but I became powerful in ways they never dreamed possible. And as I stand here today, sharing her true stories with you, I want you to understand this justice may be delayed, but it is never denied. If you've ever felt betrayed by the people closest to you, if you've ever been made to feel small, remember God sees truth surfaces and strength lives within you, even when you think it's gone. So I ask you, if my story touched your heart, don't let it stop here. Share it. Talk about it. Protect the elders in your community. Leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from, and let's remind the world together that betrayal doesn't win when truth stands tall. Family is not just blood. Family is loyalty, respect, and love that does not waver when tested. And if you have that, even from one person, you are richer than any inheritance money could ever make you. This is my new beginning. And maybe, just maybe, it can be yours too.